Now, the question always comes up, why Black Egypt? Why are you so focused? Why are Black people so focused on Egypt? First off, listen to this. Black people are not focused on Egypt. That's one. Number two, the reason why you focus on Black Egypt, or the reason why you focus on Egypt at all, is because everybody who wants to be successful does. Okay? And I'm not talking about, I'll put it this way. If you want to understand why America was so wealthy, understand, even when you look at the dollar and you see that pyramid, there's a reason. When you look at the gravesite of Thomas Jefferson or the gravesite of George Washington, you see the Tekken Nu, right? Some people call it, actually I don't even know what the white people call it, but basically that big, large pillar, they have that at their gravesites. Why do they have that at their gravesites? Because essentially that was one of the three richest nations in human history. Okay, so, and this is not just, it's not me saying it. This is what Adam Smith was saying in The Wealth of Nations. He goes, hey, how do nations become wealthy? Why don't we look at the three richest nations in human history? Okay, and that would be ancient Egypt, ancient China, and ancient India. Okay, and he says, well, when we look at those, we study them and we see a pattern, and that's what we should implement inside of Europe, to the point where people started reading his book, The Wealth of Nations, and some were saying this should be the commercial code for Europe. Now, bear in mind, when Adam Smith wrote this book, even though Europe was doing colonialism, not every European nation was doing all that good, okay? England was doing better than France and Germany, obviously, and Spain and Portugal, but it was doing so for this other reason called parsimony that he looked into, right? But the reality is this: because you study Egypt, you can understand how to build wealthy nations, okay? Because this was one of the wealthiest nations in human history. So you would not just study Egypt, you would study Egypt, you would study China, you study India, you study America, you study Russia, you study modern China, you study colonial England. You'll study these countries so that you, as a people, can also encourage a richer nation. And of course, you know, the plan was already outlined in numerous books, and I'm just kind of adding to that literature in my latest book, Uangalifu, okay? I'm just adding to that literature, and I'm adding it to it in a simpler, more straightforward manner, you know? Whereas, you know, Wealth of Nations would be 500, 600 pages, a lot of pages on, you know, different prices of potatoes in you know, like whatever, right? Uangalifu kind of just goes straight forward and says, how can you apply this in your life? How can you apply this on a national scale? Okay? That's what the book is about. It's about how to apply the principles that you can learn from an ancient, industrially independent people, right? How do you take what the richest people in human history have done and make it better? Okay, how do you implement it in a modern scenario? Okay, because when you start to study our story or our history, right, you begin to realize, this is something that we could do. But because we're not studying, because we're not reading, because we feel like we know it all, because we feel like I don't need to go look at any other culture, you know, my people used to, you know, blah, blah, blah. Because we do that, we end up with essentially an inability to develop, okay? An inability to develop and an unlikelihood, an improbability to develop. So what I'm going to tell you is this: that book, Uangalifu, you read it because our people will not advance without informed leaders, okay? Our people will not advance without informed readers. And readers, leaders, same thing, right? And that's just the fact of life. Okay, Portugal, Spain, these were richer nations. They enslaved more Africans than Britain or America, and America and Britain eclipsed them. Russia and China didn't really enslave any Africans per se, okay, directly, let's say, right? They became more, they had a better economy in some aspects than even the United States. And like now today, they have even better. Now you could say, hey, look, I know there's some, you know, the West tells me all this stuff. Look, don't worry about that. The reality is, if you want to have economic independence, there are very simple procedures that you are not learning and that you are not implementing. Okay? And because you are not learning them and you're not implementing them, you're just not going to advance. You have to apply economic principles straight out of biology, really, straight out of science, really. And that's what Kemet was all about. That's what ancient Egypt was all about. So if you want to know why you study ancient Egypt, it's because when you do, and people prove this, when you study ancient Egypt, you benefit as a people. Okay? And and that's basically, ancient Egypt is basically code for ancient Africa. When you study ancient Africa, you benefit as a people. And that's it.